Hello and welcome to the Digital Kindness Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Marcinek, and I'm so glad you're here. Today, we welcome Phil Hintz to the pod. Phil is a good friend of mine. We've been connected for quite some time, about 10 years.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to start going by going over Phil's amazing resume, and then we're going to get into some really good conversation today on the pod. So Phil is
All
completing
right.
his 32nd year in public school education and currently serving
Mhm.
as the Chief Technology Officer for Niles Township School District 219. This is just outside of Chicago,
Mhm.
Illinois. So Phil is a close neighbor of our newly elected Pope Leo.
Yes.
Um, we've been trying to get him on the pod. I don't know. He's pretty busy right now, but we'll
Yeah.
see. If he's ever up for a White Sox game, Phil, let me know.
Yeah.
Um, in June of 2015, Phil was the recipient of ISTE's Outstanding Leader of the Year.
Mhm.
This took place in Philadelphia, which I was there for.
Mhm.
In 2016, Phil made the list of National School Boards Association Top 20 to Watch in Educational
Mhm.
Technology for 2016. In 2017, Phil helped his school district earn the coveted ISTE Distinguished School District Award, which is a tremendous award and a tremendous credit to Phil's work in his district. In 2019, Phil was chosen for the Withrow CTO of the Year by the Consortium of School Networking, or otherwise known as COSIN. Most
Mhm.
recently, Phil won the Tech and Learning Magazine's Innovative Leader Award for Best Implementation of Data Privacy. He is currently pursuing his PhD in educational administration and is writing his dissertation on the impact of use of AR and VR with students with intellectual disabilities in attaining life and occupational skills. Phil, I can't wait to hear about this part as
Yeah.
well. This is
Cool.
really great, really amazing work.
Mhm.
And finally, Phil's research was recently featured in Tech and Learning magazine, highlighting the power of the metaverse for inclusive education. Whew. Okay, Phil. With that, Phil's a great friend and a fellow
Mhm.
Star Wars nerd.
Yeah.
We've both been to Skywalker Ranch in a previous
Yes.
life. So, Phil, welcome to the pod. I'm so glad you're here.
I am so glad to be here, and I'm honored and privileged to work with you. You read my resume, but hey, dude, you've got a super impressive resume too. I'll never forget learning about you and your initiatives. Working for the Federal Office of Educational Technology back in the day under Obama, which must have been a blast. I definitely want to know more about it. I mean, you and I have talked about it, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's where I first got to know you a little bit. And I'm like, wow, So, yeah, we
Yeah.
get a chance to do it together here. So let's do it.
Phil, I think we have an offshoot pod that we're just going to talk about our amazing accomplishments
Yep.
for
Hey,
30
why
minutes a
not?
day, and then just
Yeah.
everyone can listen to how amazing we are.
How
So
amazing we are.
I
How amazingly lucky we are, really.
Very much so. I agree. We
Yeah.
are very
Yeah.
lucky to be where we
Yeah.
are, and I'm always appreciative of the network that I've built
Yeah.
through social
Me too.
media, through digital tools like
Right.
Twitter back in the day,
Mhm.
and all these different conferences that we attend. And I agree. We've been the beneficiaries of being very lucky in this space. So, and I'm just grateful to be here with you today, Phil. So.
Yeah.
We are going to jump into some questions. We've got a slate of questions
Mm.
today. So,
Yeah.
Phil, you've spent your career, 32 years in schools and
Mhm.
specifically the IT side of things. Can you talk about how your work impacts students' access to technology?
Sure. I think it's probably one of the most important things I do in ed tech because I mean, for years we wanted the opportunities to, and when I say years, I'm talking back in the 90s,
Right, right.
where wouldn't it be great if we had more than one computer in the whole school, and
Yeah.
then, oh, wow, we can start to network these things together. And then, but it was never enough,
Yeah.
we always wanted the opportunity to have more. And then eventually we had cows, right? Computers on wheels with the carts and everything, but even that wasn't enough. And uh, just like you and I, probably growing up, we loved it when the teacher brought in the TV with the VCR on it, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
knew, hey, something cool was going to happen today, something different than the normal grind, right? And
Right, right.
so in the '90s or in the early 2000s, that thrill was the cow, right?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
computers on wheels. So you only had 15 maybe in a cart, and you had 30 kids in a class, so it still wasn't enough, and
No.
When we realized budget wise, we were always able to afford like one device for every three kids in our school district.
Okay.
And then the iPad came out. And when the
Right.
iPad came out, and it was literally one third the cost of a laptop,
Yep.
and we realized, hey, 3 to 1, now we can be 1 to 1. So, we said, but is an iPad a computer? Well, I think the jury is no longer out on that anymore. But at the time, it was, it was very pioneerish. But we were wanted to see, and at least now we finally had a device in everybody's hand. So there's
Right.
that digital divide, hopefully conquered at least for our school district.
Yep.
But other school districts, not the case, not all the time, right? And then, but does everybody have online access at home? So that was the next digital divide, right? And we've been
Yeah.
trying to conquer that. Luckily, the government and of course, pandemic kind of forced that issue down the road.
Yep.
The school district I work for right now literally was the first 1 to 1 netbook district in the country, basically. And they
Wow.
did netbooks back in the days before the iPad, before the Chromebook,
Yep.
and so now we're Chromebooks in the district I'm at now. But in my former district with iPads, it was definitely the game changer. We saw teachers actually um, reversing their ideas of retiring because we finally achieved a place where they could teach digitally and use the tools they wanted and have all the kids participate,
Right.
which in that digital ecosystem. And so it was a huge game changer. But we've come a long way since then. I think you and I have talked about the next digital divide is the have and have nots of AI and,
Yep.
and the paid for versions of AI versus the non-paid, the free versions of AI.
Right.
Do you get better results on the paid for version than you do so I know we have to conquer that next.
Yeah, no, and that's all, and definitely. I just want to kind of go back to a few things there. You mentioned I haven't heard cow in a while. I haven't heard that term, but yeah, that was when I first started teaching. We had cows in our classroom, computers
Yeah.
on wheels, and yeah, you're right. I mean, and it was also, I think, we talk about access too, and this is something I talked with Kim Zajac last week
Yeah.
as well. And it's not just about having the device. I mean, I think a lot of schools. I used to kind of call it airdrop technology, where we got
Yeah.
technology into classrooms, and then we took a picture with the superintendent, and it was in the paper, and it's like, hey, look at we got
Yeah.
all these devices. And I think the thing that was missing there, and the big divide, was the teacher support, teachers
Yeah.
understanding how to leverage the device. And I think we've come a long way with that. And I think we saw that I saw that at ISTE. Saw that
Mhm.
recently at FATC this past year,
Mhm.
where teachers are doing amazing things with incorporating and teaching around AI. And to think of where I see kids come into a
Mhm.
classroom, they put their laptop lit up, and they would
Yeah.
just type in a Word document, and that was EdTech, that was
Yeah.
technology implementation. So we have come a long way. And I also agree with. I remember when the iPad was announced, and I was actually, I'm me, I'm a big Apple fanboy. You can
Yeah.
see in the background all my
Yeah.
gadgets there, but I was out on the iPad. I was like, I don't know how this is going to work.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
when they started working on a prototype for the iPad 2,
Yeah.
I started looking at it, and I said, okay, this is a game changer. This is really going to help get a device in the hands of every kid. And I think that's really it's really helped, kind of like you said, kind of.
Yeah.
We have work to do on the divide, but we made great strides with the lowering the cost. And then you had Chromebooks, continue that on. So
You mentioned the iPad 2. So when we did go 1 to 1 iPads, it was iPad 2. But what
yep.
was interesting is the iPad 2 came out in April, I think, of 2011, something like that. And
Correct.
we had ordered a bunch of them and this is before we decided to go 1 to 1, but we ordered a bunch. We had some ELL monies that we needed to spend before the end of the year. And he said, okay, so we ordered 200 of the iPad 2s, knowing that they wouldn't get there in time before school got out. But so I said, you know what? Let's take advantage of this opportunity. We took the 200 that we got in. That's obviously when the App Store first came around, and we
Right.
realized, oh, hey, there's an app for that type of thing. But
Yep.
um, what the advantage that we took is we said to the teachers, Obviously the kids are gone for the summer, but teachers, guess what? We have 200 iPads. If you'd like to take an iPad home for the summer, we'll fit you out with an iPad for the summer. And the only thing you got to do is you got to come to an hour training to show you how an iPad works, what it does, what can it do. And then you have to give us 5 app reviews by the end of the summer in curricular areas so that we can build up kind of a knowledge base on what are good apps that we should be putting on that are going to be useful for the following year. So teachers
Ah,
got extremely excited about it. We called it the
yep.
iPad experiment, basically. And they did, and they got over the summer, and they got well versed on how an iPad works, and they're that's what just where they started firing on all cylinders and thinking of all the possibilities, to the point where the next school year came along, and that was when our lease was up for our normal laptops that we had, and that's
Yeah.
why we chose to dive into the iPads. But the reason we chose to dive in and go one-to-one and all in on it is because our teachers said after that summer, they were like, hey, how can we get more iPads? They started asking the parent-teacher organization, can we have some money for an iPad? We want
Right.
more iPads, and we just saw that everybody was wanting more and more iPads. So
Yeah.
we we went all
Uh,
in.
Yeah, and I love that approach because I also think we're kind of here, we're kind of there with AI right now, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We're kind of in that like, hey, we don't need to. Every teacher doesn't need to be proficient in AI. Every school administrator doesn't need to know. But like, leverage some time in the summer. Attend a
uh-huh.
webinar or a workshop, or just try it out on your own and see how you like it. I mean,
Yes,
honestly, like I didn't take a course on AI, but
right.
but I mean, you and I were kind of like natively tinker. We tinker
Yep,
with things, and I
yep.
want to know how things work. And so that's been my learning with AI. It's been my learning with the iPad and the EdTech world and all those spaces. And so I think that's a great way to talk about it. Taking something that we've learned from you've implemented with an iPad
Mm,
way back when, and that can still is relevant today, and how we
yep.
change the device, we change the system, but the approach still remains the same. So I really like that, Phil. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, so with a lot of conversations, I mean, it was hard last summer or even this fall as kids are going back into school
Hmm.
into the 24-25 school year. A lot of the conversations centered around cell phone bans in schools.
Hmm.
What's been your approach to this kind of hot topic, and what are you seeing as a result?
Sure. Well, in my role as CTO, I'm also the innovator guy.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So it's like I'm always trying to promote things. Obviously, we tried to be on the I wouldn't say cutting edge, but really against banning, even AI for that matter.
Right.
And to the point where I want to embrace it. I want to embrace the possibilities. Really, that's really and the opportunities. And we feel the same way with cell phones.
Sure.
However, we do, we're quite aware, and our teachers are quite aware that it's becoming a competing factor in them trying to deliver instruction. Now, some teachers have been great about incorporating a cell phone into some of their lessons. Like Pull Everywhere, for example, just easy
Right.
ways to check for understanding. But most teachers found it to be more of a distraction. And we were like, but we don't want to ban it. And our parents don't necessarily want to ban it. Sometimes that's the only communication device that they have to their students in emergency possibilities, And so
Sure.
um, we came up with kind of a line of and an understanding as opposed to pulling the devices completely away. Our line was no cell bell to bell.
Yep.
So yeah, you
Yep.
can have it, and you can have it in the during the school day, and for the most part, the teacher sets the tone. And if the teacher says no cell, it's no cell. But
Right.
with the understanding that sometimes the cell might be the thing we need as that tool, that
Yeah.
extra tool beyond the Chromebook. I mean, yeah, we're one-to-one Chromebooks, but there's some things that you can do on a device on a even more mobile device than you can on a Chromebook. So we didn't want to take away that opportunity,
Yep.
and the feedback has been pretty good. I will say our governor, Governor Pritzker in Illinois, was very very progressive. We have a neighbor state, Iowa, just set the law for cell phone banning, if you will.
Hmm.
And Governor Pritzker is kind of getting that same way. So we are going to get some legislation, but we try to be ahead of that legislation by
Right.
imposing our own kind of rules and not necessarily rules, but our own culture about it. And we're hoping that it will fall into line with the legislature that he's trying to propose, because the feedback has been positive in terms of, and even positive from the kids, that they're like, wow, I had no idea I was on my cell phone that much, you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
how addicted they were in a lot of ways. So, phone's ringing over here. So the
Perfect timing, right?
Yeah, how about a cell phone, right? But yeah, and so they are, we are getting good positive feedback from, even to the point where a couple of kids have come to the board meetings and expressed that, I think my grades have actually improved a little bit
Yeah.
now that we've put these mini rules in place. Not a ban, but a rule,
Right.
a positive usage of it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's the right approach. I think the word ban gets thrown around too loosely. And ban was one of the reasons why I thought about teaching digital kindness and what I wanted to do, because I kept thinking like, well, if we're banning things, if we're taking things away, then we're
Mm-hmm.
assuming that they don't exist, because the kids get them at the end of the day, or they get them when they're not in school, which is also on the weekend or at nights. And so,
Yeah.
I think I like the way you've approached it, where you're looking at more of, you're taking more of the guardrails approach.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, we
Yeah.
have this expectation amongst all of us, this norm,
Uh-huh.
that we're all going to abide by. And I think the most interesting data point that you mentioned, and I'm hearing this a lot, and I see this a lot, is that kids know they're
Mm-hmm.
in, they're sucked into these things. They know that they are
Yeah.
being manipulated into being on their device as much as they can. Somebody once told me about, like, it's like, oh, you think Apple and Google would really put, parental features
Mm-hmm.
and screen time things on their phones if they really wanted you not to be on your phone? It's like,
Right.
it's all kind of like this gamified gimmick, and we're all in the game, and we're just,
Yeah.
part of it. And so I think that's a really interesting point you bring up of students kind of stepping back, reflecting, saying, hey, my grades are better, or I feel better, or I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm missing out on things. And I think that's the right approach, because bands in the same sense can do the opposite thing, right?
Yeah.
Kids can wonder like, oh my gosh, what's on my phone, what's on my phone. But if we're teaching kids to, like, hey, there's a time and a place for a phone, there's a
Balance.
time, balance, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And finding that healthy balance, I think, is key. So
And we got to
um
do the same thing as adults, right? We got to
a hundred
model it as
percent
well.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, we have the model, and I have a 1-year-old daughter now,
yeah.
16, she'll be 17 months,
Yeah.
and I see the way she sees a phone, and I mean, it's like
Mm.
this, it's like, for young kids,
Yeah.
it's magic, right? Because
Yeah.
you push something happens, the screen, the colors, and it's
Yes.
just, I mean, that's what I thought TV was, but I couldn't actually touch a TV and make it go.
Right.
I just had to sit back passively. But
Mm-hmm.
no, you're right. I think from all ages, we need to be really mindful, both in schools and at home, about how we're giving kids phones and access to technology. So,
Yeah.
um, so I want to kind of go back. I'm really excited to hear about your work, your PhD work.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is really fascinating stuff, and I think it's really important work, because I worked in my first job was in a special needs classroom, and it was way before we had one-to-one technology, and we were helping kids, get jobs and learn life skills to go out there and function, so
Yeah.
that they could have jobs and you know be a part of society, as
Yeah.
they should. So you're currently researching use of AR, VR, XR tools to enable
Mm-hmm.
neurodiverse students to become more included in their classrooms and develop life and occupational skills.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is something I'm this true to very close to my heart. Can you tell me a little bit more about this work, and just like how it's
Sure.
going, what you're focused on?
Well, part of it was, starting the road of dissertation, especially later in my career. As you mentioned, I've been in it 30 some years, and finally at a place where it's something I want to do for myself. Number one. Number two, I've got two of my kids who have their master's degrees now, and so
Wow.
they're at the same level as dad now. So it's like, okay, I got to raise the bar. And so I went back to school to, to do the PhD thing. And then, when they're telling you, okay, well, you got to write this dissertation and, you're going to be living with that for the next couple of years. It better be something you like. And so
Yeah.
I started thinking, yeah, obviously I love technology. I love the possibilities of AR and VR. You and I have gone back and forth. I've learned so much from you on the Apple Vision Pro, which I think is really where
Yeah.
things are going. There was some debate for a while there that, oh, well, VR was a fad and it's going away.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's just getting started, especially when you add in the layer of AI into it.
Yeah.
The possibilities are absolutely endless. And so those possibilities, I started thinking about it, and I have a personal, passion, I guess you could say, because I have a son with special needs. My son,
Right.
Joshua, is about to be 22 years old, so he's about to age out of the transition program. So that's post high school, and with the federal laws, they get to be taught until age 22.
Right.
And he has Down syndrome. And I got to
Hmm.
thinking one day, he has always wanted to be a firefighter. He could tell you all the different fire trucks that are out there. He could tell you all the different the tools that fire folks use, what they're used for, what the different trucks are used for, and their equipment, you name it. And I got to thinking, well, if he wanted to be a firefighter, would they ever let him be a firefighter? He's developmentally delayed, quote unquote.
Yep.
So he's a little slower on the uptake, and in an emergency situation, oh boy, you need to be quick
Right.
on your feet. And I thought, well, with VR, he could learn how to fight a fire. He could actually get hurt fighting fire in VR. He could get burned.
Hmm.
And that would be a great way to learn how not to get burned without the physical ramifications of actually getting burned. In
Yeah.
VR, if it's a virtual burn, it's not really a burn, right? I mean, but he could be in those situations and get and practice those skills that maybe after enough practice, if they were to run him through the drills to become a fireman, that maybe he'd have the skills that he would need, that they would trust him to help out, and maybe pulling the hoses or whatever, and actually be a
Right.
fireman um, in a certain capacity. And I thought, wow, what an advantage that would provide for my son who wants to live his dream just like every other son and daughter out there in the world. They want to live
Yeah.
out their dreams no matter what their abilities are. And so the other thing I kept thinking about, and the reason I'm studying AR and VR in particular, augmented reality, virtual reality, and I've done my review of literature. It's been around since the 90s. I mean, actually, it's been around for even longer, but really they started putting their fingers on it research wise. 1994, a guy by the name of Paul Milgram designed the virtuality continuum, which actually starts with reality, where we're in right now, to the
Yep.
point where you augment reality with some sort of technological device, a cell phone, an iPad, a camera of some sort, to the point where you eventually evolve and move into full virtuality where nothing around you is real. It's completely virtual. So there's a combination. And I got to thinking, what I understand is AR and VR allow the abstract to kind of become more concrete for folks. That's part of the research that's out there.
Yeah.
And my dissertation chair literally, she said, well, Phil, that's too broad of a topic, AR or VR. You're going to have to choose one or the other. And what I've learned, it's not one or the other. It's not a one size fits all. There are some kids that can't handle having the headset on their head,
Right.
being
Right.
with the cyber sickness and all of that it's called, basically motion sickness with a virtual device. Some kids can't handle that. So
Mhm.
AR they could handle because they can still see their reality along with the augmentation of that reality would work great. On the other hand, there are some kids that maybe don't have fingers, maybe they don't have the dexterity, they may not even have hands or arms.
Yeah.
Um, VR AR is not going to work for them, but all of a sudden they put a VR device on them, and now they look in front of them. They have their hands, they have their fingers, they have their arms, they have parts that might have been a disability to them in real life are now an ability for them in virtual life.
Yeah.
And the VR part, I told you the story of my son with a fire. But on the AR side, about that same time when I started down the path of this research, my son had turned 18 and he was eligible to vote. And
Mm,
his high school was up for a referendum, a funding referendum, and he wanted to go vote yes for the referendum. And I got to thinking, well, he's got a second grade reading level. How's that going to work? Is he going to be able to even read the ballot? How is he going to make an informed decision on
right,
that? And
right.
I was like, how does it work? So we went to the polling place because he was eligible to vote. He was the right age, right, and everything, and had a voter card. Um, and what they told me is that, yeah, you can read the ballot to him, but he has to make all the decisions. I'm like, okay, that's good. And I thought, wow, what if we developed this hasn't developed yet. So if any of your listeners have this idea or have a way to make this happen, wouldn't it be great if you had an AR app that could scan the ballot, read the ballot to the person, possibly put up a video of whatever the platform is of the candidates that you're being asked to
Yeah,
vote on, and become an informed voter. And I got to thinking, what fundamental right, what is the most fundamental life skill to have than your right to exercise your voice in democracy?
right.
And here's a way that technology could help students, neurodiverse students, have that ability to still be a participant in their citizenry. And
Wow.
so I look
Yeah.
at the power of these tools and I'm like, the possibilities are endless. We just need to start developing it.
Yeah, and just, I mean, I have to just even step back for a minute here because this is amazing stuff. I mean, and this is the reason why, yeah, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
technology has always been about access and opportunities. Access to
Mm-hmm.
technology is the first part, and then the opportunities that it can take you down for a variety of learners, for neurodiverse, students. And I think that's where the real innovation happens. And
Yep.
I think it's, we go back to talking about how lucky we are. And I think that's also a part of that is like,
Mm-hmm.
we know, we know in our roles that not every kid has those
Yeah.
opportunities. There are Joshes out there that, you know, don't have an amazing father like you who was researching this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I hope work that you're doing now can help support a generation of students as we go forward, because I think all this stuff, they're not just games, they're not just gadgets, they
Yeah.
can be life-changing experiences for all of our students. And this is the good of technology. There's a lot of bad
Yeah.
with it, we know, and we acknowledge that, but there's so much good, and everything you said is just what you want to hear and talk about in technology. um
Well, I'll tell you if I can add one more portion to this,
sure.
where I'm getting my study involved because it's a phenomenological, it's a qualitative dissertation. I'm using a platform called Florio, and if your listeners haven't familiar with that, it's Floreo. It was built. It's a platform that was built by a gentleman who had a son with autism, and he got to thinking one day, if my son ever got pulled over by a police officer in a
Mm,
car, would he know how to respond from a social aspect and be able to respond appropriately to that scenario? And
right.
so he started building this platform that had basically they're all social scenarios. That's what Florio is. Everything from what do you do when you get pulled over by a police officer to navigating a grocery store to crossing the street. And I've used the one that's crossing the street where it's, and you and I take that for granted. A lot of people take that for
Sure.
granted, but
Yeah.
people with intellectual disabilities may not have the capabilities or the skills developed just yet. And so this crossing the street, for example, you'll see the cars going in front of you, and all of a sudden they'll come to a stop, and you look up at the stoplight, and the stoplight says stop, and then all of a sudden the sign across the street says walk, and you start walking, and boom, you get dinged. Why do you think they got dinged? Because what should you do when you cross the street? You should always look both ways, right? And
Right,
so
right.
that program is actually watching and sensing for that and assessing the student while they're doing that activity and giving feedback to the student so that they next time they'll know better not to look to look both ways before they
Yeah.
cross the street. And that's one of the things I really like about this is you get to practice real life. Um, and build confidence before you go out into the world and actually have to do real life. You get to practice it a little bit, and that's what these programs offer students to be able to do. So
Yeah, and that's amazing. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, confidence, right? I mean, it's like we
yes,
things we take for granted. I mean, things that I was taught, but some having neurodiverse learners, a different variety of learners, we all learn differently. And so
mm-hmm.
I think having that kind of life skill approach to give those folks the confidence is it's a game changer, really. I mean, it
Yep,
really is. And
absolutely.
and and this kind of work and this kind of technology, the hope is that it only gets better and broadens out with research like what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
and within other companies. And I want to also go back to that the idea of like, having the headset on. And I remember when I was wearing the Apple Vision Pro and I saw some of their immersive experiences for the first time. Trust me,
Mm-hmm.
I got a little nauseous.
Yes,
Just
yep.
like because I'm not one for heights. Like I don't like
Oh yeah,
uh
I know
I
which one
don't
you
like
did then.
yeah, right. I don't like heights. I don't like
Yeah,
bridges. Like I'm not a fan. Flying is fine because it's. I'm always
yeah.
amazed by the art of flying. But yeah, no, so that's a good point too because it's like even thinking that like yeah, every kid in a headset is a game changer. But yeah, some kids that's not a good place for them at all. For any of us really.
Yeah,
Um, all right, so I want to shift
yeah,
gears a little bit. So Phil, you are also a podcast host. I mean, it's like
yeah,
I've had several podcast hosts on already so far, and it's
yeah,
really cool. So your show is Zero Breach Zone. It's
yeah.
focused on cybersecurity, specifically in best practices for K-12 schools and school leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Share a little bit about the podcast, and then also
Sure.
maybe if you could just a little tidbit in the kind of the state of cybersecurity in K-12 schools.
Sure. Well, the podcast, I have a co-host, and literally we started doing the podcast before I even met him in real life,
Right.
because a mutual friend of ours kind of got us together and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a podcast in K-12 cybersecurity that would
Right.
focus on that?" And he knew my background, and he knew my co-host Andy's background, and thought we might be a good mix. And it turns out it's really been great. And we've since met each other. And the Zero Breach Zone is the name of our podcast, and that is kind of the focus. I mean, we want to make schools a zero breach zone. That's
Hmm.
like that's perfection, right? And so we're always
Right.
trying to
Right.
get there. We probably never will truly get there, but we'll do whatever we can to get as close as we can to that idea. And
Yeah.
we're always talking about the fact that it's not if, it's when a school gets
Yep.
hacked or gets attacked. Hopefully not completely hacked, but actually attacked, because that those attacks are coming all the time. The hackers out there understand that we have a treasure trove of data, of information about our students, that they could, if they could capture that data, they could hold it for years, decades, literally, and then all of a sudden release it slowly to the point where they, are, if they have the right information, they could go out and steal identities basically through that,
Right. Right.
get social security cards, get credit cards off of our little kindergarten students who, you know,
Right.
don't even have a credit score yet, but by the time they do get a credit score, it could be already ruined,
Yep.
thanks to the
Yep.
hackers out there. And so it's our job, to do the best we can. It costs so much to have the tools out there to protect schools. Schools need to have probably, I don't know. And sometimes, in my opinion, I feel like schools need more access to protective tools than our corporations do. I mean,
Sure.
corporate espionage and corporate hacking and that sort of thing is bad too, right? Intellectual properties and that sort of thing. But our intellectual property is our students' lives, right? Our
Yeah.
students' data,
Right.
our students' information. And so we need to do just a good job of protecting that. We have a tool that we've used in the school districts, in our school district, and in Andy, my co-host school district, called CyberNut, and it's a cybersecurity awareness tool that's out there, that is designed for K-12 schools, and so they are the founder of CyberNut is the one that got us together and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a podcast about the and making people aware of the threats that are out there, but also the tools and some of the things that are out there that can help districts become a zero breach zone down the road." And so, CyberNut is actually like I said, it's a cybersecurity awareness training software, and it's designed for schools. It's gamified, so our staff all is not only getting trained on what to look for in phishing attacks and all the different ways hackers can try to manipulate us to giving up data,
Yep.
and the tool actually allows them to be able to click on a little squirrel. It's an extension that's in their email, and they click on this little squirrel, and I, to this day, I'm still getting forwarded emails from teachers saying, "I think this might be a phishing attack or a phishing email. I'm not
Yeah.
sure," and all this. And I'm like, "Well, then you should be pressing the squirrel, because
Yeah.
number one, if it is a true phishing attack, you will have done your part to protect the district. Number
Got it.
two, if it's one of our campaigns trying to teach you or to make you aware of cybersecurity, then you will have earned acorns, because that's the gamified part of
Oh,
CyberNut."
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and so now I've got staff, and there's actually a leaderboard involved for each of our schools and for our
Yeah.
district as a whole, and the teachers love. So it changes the game, because some of the other
Yeah.
programs that are out there, it's more punitive. It's like, "Oh, you know what? You clicked on a link you shouldn't have. Now you get to watch 20 videos on how not to click on a link."
Right. Right.
And it's this way.
Yeah.
It's more positive. It's more of a way that, hey, you do something right, you're going to get rewarded, and hopefully you'll learn in the process. So,
Yeah, no, and I love that, and I think you bring up some really good points there. As being an IT director myself, I think one of the things I've noticed in the last 5 years, even I'd say 5 to 10 years, is that the cyber attacks have gone away from like the big banks or
mhm,
the big targets, and it's like Walmart's and Target and
yeah,
all these places, because they have, like you said, the money and the resources to funnel into a whole cyber team that can support and put these proactive measures in place. Whereas, school districts across the country, a rural school
mhm,
district or an urban school district, or even, independent schools who have lots of money but don't know how to really resource it and allocate it towards a cybersecurity. That's a real challenge, I think, and that's where you're seeing a lot of these cyber attacks happen. We see them almost daily at the school I work at, and it's just something we have to do to put preventative measures in place. But I think I want to kind of segue then to this
mhm,
program you talked about, CyberNut, which is really fantastic in the sense
yep,
that it definitely doesn't create those punitive measures or slaps on the wrist when you do something wrong. It's like, hey, here's a easy way, for you to
mhm,
check something. And then, I love the kind of the community building aspect that's subversive within something like
yeah,
that, where, yeah, you probably have a lot of people talking about it. And I
mhm,
think that's a great way for people to learn about this subject where, you know, you give a presentation on cybersecurity to a group of faculty or teachers,
yeah,
and you lost
yeah,
them as
mhm,
soon as you put the first slide up. But if
yep,
you create something like this where it actually puts them in the scenarios and goes
mhm,
through different things, I mean, that's important. Because these are skills that can be applied to outside of school, because we all get
yep,
the random
yep,
text messages or the
that's for
calls,
sure.
or
Yep,
we just got through tax season, and that's a
yeah,
big scam sometimes. So you know that's I think this is all great. And yeah, so if you
mhm,
haven't, anybody listening out there, make sure zero breach zone.
yep.
um, I thought it was an action movie when I first saw the title. I was like, Zero
Ooh,
Breach Zone. I'm like, I'm gonna
yeah,
see this in IMAX. But
yeah, yeah,
no, this no Zero Breach Zone. I think that's
yep,
a great podcast, and I think it's a show for everyone, really,
mhm,
because it's like cybersecurity affects us whether we're working a school or if we wake up in the morning. Cybersecurity is something we all need to really kind of own in our own
yes.
spaces. So
Well,
great stuff there.
I expect your listeners to be watching it sometimes, so they can see you as one of our guests on the podcast
Let's
sometime
do it.
too. So
Let's
yeah,
do it. I'll jump right over. I'll jump right over
yeah,
into the box
boom,
next to me, and
yeah, yeah,
just like that. All right, Phil. We have a final question that we ask all of our guests
yeah.
on the pod. What strategies do you use to step away from the digital world?
Oh, yeah, just put the thing down, right?
Right. We're only
just
that easy.
to step away. Yeah, I mean, it's just, oh, that's kind of a tough question. I don't know that I was expecting that one. I should have been expecting it, right? But no,
Yeah.
yeah. What strategy? I mean, it's realizing what's important in life, and people are important.
Right.
Yes, the technology can help you connect people, but
Yeah.
sometimes the technology can get in the way. And actually, if there's a conversation that can be had face to face, similar to what we're doing right now, although this is a virtual face to face, but if it can
Yeah.
be done face to face versus trying to interpret the all caps in a text, or something like
Yeah.
that, where all of a sudden, oh well, like my dad, he was always famous for putting most of his texts in caps because he left the caps lock on. It wasn't because he
Right.
was
Right.
mad at me. He wasn't
Yeah.
mad at me. It just that was it. But somebody
Sure.
could look at that and say, I'm going to interpret that hey, this person really feels strongly about that. Well, it's realizing that the more you can have real people and real time and real conversations matter. And we still need to do that. We still need to incorporate that. And I think not now more so than ever. I mean, obviously, there's some value in some AI chat bots and being able to have, if you're a person
Yeah.
who's all alone and maybe is in a nursing home and needs somebody to talk to, a chat bot might actually help them in that. So that's a
Yeah.
positive of it. But they would tell you they would much rather have their grandkids coming in face to face, sitting on their lap or sitting around, running around them, versus having to do it digitally. And so the
Yeah.
more we can make a conscious effort of choosing the right mode, or right vehicle for that relationship. Sometimes the right mode is the technology, but I would say at least 50-50. It goes either way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And just the simple novel idea of
Yeah.
conversation, no matter where that conversation is. I
Yeah.
think it's important to have that and to keep, stories and history
Yes.
alive through those methods. So uh, great
Well,
time today, Phil. I appreciate you being
yeah.
on the pod, and I look forward to coming on your pod, the Zero
Okay.
Breach Zone, someday soon. So thank you
Yeah.
for being here, and thank you for all who are listening.
Thank you for having me.